Welcome to Moderate to Severe, the podcast where we will dive deep into what it means to be a man today and tackle the real and raw issues facing us. We've created a safe space for setting aside the bravado, peeling back the armor, and talking about what's really going on inside. Mental health is no longer just a buzzword. It's real life and something that I, just like many of you, suffer through daily. I'm Jonathan Scott, and I want to focus on the value of vulnerability through personal stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you take care of your mental well-being and redefine what strength really is. We'll dive into the everyday battles we face, from handling stress, overcoming self-doubt, and figuring out how to ask for help and accept it. Each week, I'll be sharing my own experiences, along with stories from other men, mental health experts, and everyday people who have seen or been through it all. So if you're here to listen, to learn, or just feel less alone, you're in the right place. So get comfortable and let's break the silence together. How are you? And thanks again for tuning back into Moderate to Severe. I am your host, Jonathan Scott. You know, one of the things I talked about last week was the idea that I was this functioning, depressed guy. And as I went back and forth and I started thinking about it and receiving some of the emails, it kind of confirmed to me that I was functioning at a very high level. One of the things I realized is that the closest people to me until recently, and when I say recently, I mean probably the last 2 or 3 years, did not even know that I had anxiety, depression, or anything else of that nature. I received calls from family who asked when it started, how long I've had it, and things of that nature. I've never been one to talk about it. The only one who really knew was my wife. The depression did not start till probably about 24, maybe between the ages of 24, 28. Okay, the anxiety was always there. It was always something that I've dealt with, something that I had from an early age, so I knew how to handle it, okay? I can remember at a very early age dealing with anxiety, you know, like I mentioned, going and, you know, getting drinks of water because I thought my chest was going to, you know, tighten up and I was going to stop breathing. But it was something that happened so often that I didn't really talk about it. One of the things that happened to me when I was younger is I used to go to work with my father. And my father was a construction worker, and I used to play in the basements of the houses that they were building. And one day I was throwing around the concrete cinder blocks, and when I went to go pick one up, I stuck myself on a hypodermic needle. Now, I've never told anybody this story. When I stuck myself, there was no blood or anything in the needle. I was like 10, 11, 12. But I remember it was during the time where HIV came out, or when they started talking about it more. And I remember that's all I could think about. And I ruminated on that. Oh, it had to be for the next 6 or 7 years. Was I going to get AIDS? Was I going to get HIV? Because all you heard about was that you could get it from little things such as sitting on the toilet seat. And then we're talking right when in the beginning. And my mother was a big, you know, one to kind of say things and, you know, kind of blow things up. And that's what I thought about when I went to bed every night was I going to die? Was something going to happen? Was I going to get sick? And this anxiety was just so intense that I remember not being able to sleep for months and months and months. Even to the fact that when I got older, I didn't want to give blood because I thought that they were going to find that I had HIV or some kind of other blood-borne disease. You know, when we look at the statistics of mental health, you know, in the year 22, which is after COVID, 23% of adults experienced a mental illness in the past year, 23%. That is almost 1/4 of the population. Now, think about it. If you're in a group of 20 people, that means 5 people in that group has some type of mental illness. I always thought about the fact of if something were to happen to me, how many people would have said they had no idea? My guest later on is my sister, and she'll be one of the ones who will talk about it. She had no idea. My sister Shannon, I have 2 sisters, was not aware of my situation until I told her about 3 years ago. 3-4 years ago is when I had my really first bad episode dealing with depression, where I needed to come out and kind of tell people. I needed my wife to have some people that she could talk to and bounce things off of. It was rough. It was extremely rough on her. As I said, for 20 years, she's been the only one who's known about it. She's kept it private. She's protected me. But I did start to tell people. I told my sister Shannon. I eventually told my father. I told 2 or 3 close buddies. But it was something that I was having a really hard time hiding anymore. Um, with that being said, another scary thing is that 13 million adults in 22 had serious thoughts of suicide. All right. That's 5% of the population. That's the highest ever recorded. Okay. And in that same year, 13% of kids ages 12 to 17 also reported serious threats of suicide. Now, when you think about that, think about the fact that most of these things are not known to other people. They don't know they're having these thoughts. They don't know that there is concern. All right. That is why we are doing this, to kind of bring some light to this stigmatized topic. We need to discuss with kids, fathers need to discuss, mothers need to discuss. It's not just a male-female issue, okay? Male or female, I'm sorry. It's an everybody issue. When I started this, I started with the tagline masculinity and mental health. But as I've been doing this for a couple of weeks now and creating the content, you start to realize that it's more than just a men's mental health issue. It's just a mental health issue, to put it blankly. Working in schools, one of the things that I always do is I always stand at my door. I stand at my door for a couple of reasons. Number one, I like to be a presence in the hallway. Number two, I like to see how my kids look when they come in. You can tell how a kid's feeling and a day's feeling just by staring at their face. I'm not saying that I'm the greatest educator in the world, but I mean, if you can't stand at your door and know what kind of mood your student is in before the class starts, I think you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. Teaching high school as I do, these kids cannot hide it. Like I said last episode, I was not hiding it to my 14 and 17-year-old, just the same as my 17 and 14-year-old can't hide to me when they're feeling down and bad. 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses begin by age 14. 14, that's freshman year in high school. Okay, some start younger, some start later, but almost half start by age 14 and 75% by the age of 24. Now, my anxiety, as I said, started before I was 14. My depression started probably in my mid to late 20s, early 30s. Don't remember the exact time, just remember the feelings that I was starting to get. When we start thinking about why it's so important to talk about, we need to talk about the fact that the risks that are involved. When I just gave that fact about the suicide and things, most families, when they talk about it, state the fact that they had no idea there was something going on. There was something going wrong. Opening up the lines of communication is important. I did not do that with my family. I don't know how my family would have reacted. My family was not about an emotional family. We did not talk about our emotions. We did not express our emotions. We pretty much just went about our day. Emotions were something that were not talked about. Even to this day, and I know my dad will listen, but, he has a hard time understanding and not getting why, the why behind it. And I try to tell him, that the why is something that I search for too. Something that I've always been searching for is why. Why do I have this? Why did I get this? I'm a good guy. I don't do anything. What is going on? What am I feeling? And you start realizing that the why that you have it it's not really the important reason. The important thing is that you do have it and how you're going to handle it. And that's one of the things that I really try to get through in these podcasts is that if you have it, understanding why you have it, okay, is not as important as really getting the help you need. Now, the help I needed, came about probably 3 years ago. And as my ketamine doctor will say, it was a combination of things. It was the ketamine. It was the serious DBT training that I did at CCDBT with Dr. Burns and her group. And it was also the psychiatry and the medication. Right now I'm on a mood stabilizer. I take something for anxiety and depression, and I take something for my ADHD. And it's pretty much the first time, even in those last 3 years when I was taking medication, that my focus has been really spot on. I said I do take supplements, so I'm feeling really good and really on point. Now, with that being said, there's also the other things that I have to do. I have to work out every day. For an example, I have to make sure that I'm walking or going to the local gym that I go to. Yesterday, I didn't because I had to go somewhere early in the morning. I got sidetracked. It was a dreary day up here in the Northeast. And one thing led to another. And I pretty much spent the day on the couch calling it a self-care day. Now, one day of self-care every once in a while is definitely important. Okay, even regardless that I had a union president about 20 years ago tell us that there was no such thing as a mental health day. There definitely is a mental health day. And I'm a firm believer in that. But when I went to go wake up this morning, I didn't feel like getting up. And I re-hit my alarm clock, and then I re-hit the alarm clock again. And I looked at it, and it was about 25 minutes to when the class was going to start at 5 in the morning. Now I have to go to bed early because I have to wake up early because I have to work out. When I went to go re-hit it that third or fourth time, I said to myself, this is not good. If I do not get out and work out, I am going to be in trouble. So I got up, I went worked out. It was a brutal workout. It was the worst. I sucked. For those of you that know Orange Theory, it's where I go. You're supposed to get 12 splat points. I just barely got 13 of them, and I was drowning the whole way to it. I also need to work out for my weight. Some of the medication does put weight on me. I do like to eat. I do like to snack. There's nothing that I won't eat pretty much except cooked carrots. I despise cooked carrots. So if we ever meet, you can have my cooked carrots. But going back, these are things that should be available to all people who are struggling with the mental illness. And the numbers that I just said are staggering, 1 in 20 kids. I'm pretty sure it's 1 in 20. Don't quote me. I don't have that down. Close to 1 in 4 adults. All right. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 adults have some type of mental illness. All right. So we're looking at a large percent of the population. And the one thing I really want you to think about is how many of them do you know, or who do you know that's not? For a lot of years, I think people may have looked at me as being a little lazy. I don't think I was lazy at all. It was just the depression that was holding me down. I used to do a lot of things. I used to like to keep up on the yard and do that, but it inhibits you and it stops you, and it's just unexplainable. But as that functioning, depressed guy, I got up for work every day. I went to work. I put on a good face. Now I realize that it might not have been. Last year pretty much confirmed that when one of my students said to me, "What's going on, Scott? You got to, you don't look all right today. You look off. You look like you're sad." And I knew why. And then I also knew that he knew why. So, the taking care of yourself, the explaining to other people, the getting rid of the stigma, it's all things that, I like to talk about. Moving forward, I am excited to bring my sister in. She does know a lot about me. She's been there for my 46, almost 47 years. So without further ado, we will bring in Shannon Doherty. So today we have a very important guest on the Moderate to Severe podcast. Deciding who was going to be my first guest was a pretty tough decision. Everybody wanted to be on the show. Some people had absolutely nothing to offer. Some people had a lot to offer. But in the end, I decided to go with someone who has known me pretty much my entire life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce my sister, Shannon Doherty. She was not on 90210, but she could have been. So go ahead, Shannon, say hi.
Hey, everybody.
So Shannon is going to give us a little glimpse into what I was like as a child growing up, home life and things of that nature. Shannon's going to give you her perspective. Now, Shannon did not live with me full time. She lived with her father. So if you put 2 and 2 together, we are half brother and sister, but we never considered ourselves that. We always considered ourselves to be full blood. So Shannon did not live with me, but Shannon was there a lot, lived in the same town. So Shannon, the age difference is minuscule now. It's 8 years, so it seems like peanuts. But When we were growing up, it was a lot different. 8 years is big. When I was 6, you were 14, and every year that I was, you would add 8, and we would get to your age, and that's kind of how it has worked throughout our life.
Yeah.
What was that like as a child?
Well, let me just start by I remember pretty much you being an infant, and I will admit to it, I did drop you on your head, maybe, but you just bounced off the couch. I grabbed you. I do remember this. I apologize. I remember it very clearly. It was the brown couch, picked you up, and everybody else was in the other room, and I was watching you, and I was 8. So, that's my first memory of you was really little, and I cried and I was scared, and you were my, first little sibling, let's just say. So I loved you dearly. Then you grew up a little bit. Let's go to like 6 and kind of 5, 6 years old. You were a nervous kid, and you might have been considered annoying, which I don't like that word, to adults, tiresome. Maybe they thought you were inconvenient. In our household, that household definitely had ADHD, bouncing off the walls, high energy kid, but fun, definitely fun, always looking to have a good time. Um, yeah, loved you.
So, when you say I was fun, was it the constant fun, like doing things, playing games, or was it just constant activity, constant movement, constantly having to do something, never able to sit? Was I ever able to sit down still? Because as an adult right now,
No,
I was just diagnosed with the ADHD, so I was just put on Strattera about 2 months ago. I had
yeah.
trouble as an adult sitting still. Is that kind of the same as a child?
I honestly can't even remember you sitting there without either like tapping your leg or flicking a pencil or bouncing a ball, or you never sat still. It absolutely did not sit still. Probably ended up helping you in sports eventually when you were able to rally that in a little bit. But no, you were a little bit I hate the word crazy because that's what they called you back then. Like, this kid's crazy, and that goes to show you too, like in the 80s and stuff, how parents were to their kids when you go to now, and how a lot of parents are not to their kids, try not to be.
So one of the things that our mother used to tell us, who's no longer here, is that when we lived at the apartments in downtown Freehold, we got a fence put around the backyard. And I think it was Sears. I want to say Sears put the fence up. And our mother used to tell the story about how they put the fence up to keep me in the backyard. But when the guy was doing the paperwork to sign out, I actually was in the backyard, jumped the fence, and ran around to the front door and smiled at everybody. So is that the kind of stuff that I would do? Just, never contained, just constantly moving, in motion, and going.
Absolutely. And a lot of it was just to get a laugh and um approval. Like, look what I did. I made everybody laugh. Don't get too mad at me. I'm funny.
It looks like it. And I think about our relationship back then. And I remember coming home from elementary school when you were driving because you were 8 years older than us. And I remember the big green car. It was always nice to come home and see the big green car in the driveway because that meant Shannon was there. Um, when I was on the bus, because I did get thrown off the bus and I used to have to walk home in fourth and fifth grade because I didn't know how to act on the bus. What kind of things did you see as I got older in my behavior, in the way I handled myself, or just my whole around like mental well being?
So, I had some of my own struggles about that age too, maybe even earlier than I got the car. Definitely a lot more struggles. But so I was having my own problems with our mom. But I do remember you getting wider before you got taller, and you tended to get bullied. I remember some close family members, or we call them our family, but they were just maybe our cousins, maybe protecting you on the way home from school, and you getting bullied and jumping in, and you turned out to be 6'2" and turned out to be a really good athlete, But before you reached that, you did have a lot of probably insecurities. You always had a lot of friends, but you definitely had a lot of insecurities. I do think you got along with a lot of adult stuff, like the teachers and coaches.
Yeah, I think one of the first times I really knew the insecurities was when mom took us shopping. And I'll never forget this. And I tell this story. One of the worst days of my life was going shopping in Peddler's Village down by Manasquan, New Jersey. And we were going shopping and we were getting a pair of pants for school. And my mother said the H word. She said, "You are going to get a pair of husky pants." And husky pants were different than the other pants.
Yeah.
Okay. The material seemed a little bit stiffer. The color was a little bit darker. But the worst part about it was next to the size, there was a letter H, which meant you were husky. So the pants were called husky pants for the husky boys. And I remember getting them when I was probably about 8, 9, or 10 and just being mortified because you might as well just say you have fat pants on, but they were husky pants. But I do remember getting bullied. I remember, getting beat up on a couple holidays. I think there were Memorial Day parades and things of that nature, um,
Mhm.
which kind of subsided by the time I got to middle school. Maybe high school. Middle school, I did still got into my fair share of altercations. Um, but as I hit high school and out of middle school, I started to come into my own with the athletics and things of that nature, which we'll talk about in future episodes. But it was a way for me to release some of that aggression I had and some of that, I don't want to say I was a violent person, but more of the violent acts of like wrestling and football and even track. What was my role in the family as I got into the high school years?
So I think a lot of what happened was that you really wanted to protect mommy. You were always looking out. Okay. And our other sister. You were big time, big brother, macho. No one's going to F with us. But when it came to mommy, you were everything about her made you nervous. So, who's coming over? Where you going? When are you coming home from work? What's going on? You became like nervous about her, but you always wanted to protect her, even though she tended to mock us all, for her own jokes, et cetera, et cetera. She was funny. I tell everybody she was great. She was hard to have as a mother.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and we're not talking ill about her, but it was hard. The idea of, as Shannon mentioned, the butt of the jokes was, we could be the butt of the jokes if it got a laugh. I remember that growing up. I remember that vividly
All for the
in high
joke, all for the
school.
comedy.
Right. And it even went so far as you got later in life and, it was colleges and whether there were girlfriends or fiancés or things of that nature, there was always a joke. There was always something like that we were the butt of. But still, we learned about that. But one of the reasons why I asked about my role, okay, was what kind of history do you know of that our family had with mental illness? Now, when I was away in Sierra Tucson, and I'll share this with you in future episodes, we did a genealogy diagram. And what that is pretty much like a family tree, but it talks about the health, addictions, mental illness. And I'm going to share mine with you in future podcasts. But right now, Shai, I just want to let you know, what was the mental health outlook of our family, not from my father's side, but more from mommy's side?
So, because I'm older and I knew a lot, and I was actually, unfortunately, privy to a lot at a young age, our mother, which I ended up forgiving a lot of her behavior, had a mother that was severely mentally ill from young, whether it was brought on from childbirth and having too many children. You know, when she had, our grandmother was speaking of, Dawn, had children, it definitely probably wasn't acknowledged or treated well. So mommy never knew her at all. Our mother, Carol, never knew her mother. She never had a bond, a connection. And from what I know, Dawn ended up being put into a psychiatric ward and not treated well. And I think it, hit a couple other people in our family. And our dear Aunt Gail, who I loved too, had it too, but she also handled it different than our mother. Our mother tended to go walk through the fire of things, whether it was right or wrong, and she had a big personality. What she had to deal with growing up, I ended up having to accept of why she was the way she was. Because, anyone that knows us knows that mommy had me at 17 and it wasn't easy. So definitely, she never had a bond with her mother because they basically took Dawn and said, we got to take her, and these kids are going to all other families to raise. And so that's what I know about that. There's probably a lot more stuff I could deep dive. I think they did a lot of stuff to her medically that is barbaric now. Our grandmother, I'm speaking of.
Yeah, and our grandmother actually passed away in Marlborough State Psychiatric Hospital, which no longer
Yeah.
exists. But it was pretty much what you would see in the movies, where they would just take you and lock you away until you passed away, unfortunately. And you know, that's how she passed. Now, when you think about it, and the passing of the genes, from my grandmother to my mother to myself, and like Shannon said, it hit other people along the way. My mother was always funny, was always trying to do things, and we just thought it was mommy. Um,
Yeah.
but then there would be times where she would not be mommy. She would be aggravated and mean. And as a kid, you don't know which role to go. As we became adults, her illness became much more severe, much more pronounced, and it was something that had to be taken care of, which we'll talk about later. But, my struggles as a kid were compounded by the fact that I really had no one to talk to. If something happened or there was a fight, I had to, hit them back. If there was, I got hurt or something, it was rub dirt on it. All the things that nowadays we kind of look at and we say, that's not the way we're going to parent. Now, I am not criticizing my parents raising me at all. They raised me and my sisters, how they, thought it was raised. Neither one of them came from secure backgrounds with raising. More things we'll
Right.
talk about. But, Shannon, let's talk about now. I'm 47 in a month. Oh, I have a wife. I have 3 kids. I have a 5-pound dog that I still don't know how ended up in my house. What do you see? I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I really told you that I struggle with mental health issues. But what do you see? I mean, can you tell the difference? Because as I said in the last episode, my kids know. I thought I was playing this big trick on everybody and I had the wool pulled over their eyes. But they could tell that there was something wrong with me. Can you tell a difference in my moods? I mean, can you tell when I'm in a good mood? Do I disappear when I'm not? Like, how would you explain me now to the listeners?
All right. Well, if there's a person on this earth that I need to call to make me feel better, I got to say it's you. So you've always had this really positive vibe, even on a bad day. And I don't know, people that know me and you, I'll mention my friend Denise say, God, you and your brother you talk all the time. We tend to click. We don't even have to really say too much and we can just hang out and you know what I'm feeling and I know what you're feeling. But you have an ability, I guess, in even your worst times to make me feel better. And then I think maybe your darkest time was maybe 2 years ago. And you just were really confiding in me and you were just like, Shan, I can't explain it. It's just there, which leads me to believe it's chemical because it kind of comes around to that thing where you tell someone, oh, my brother's having a really hard time, he's struggling. And everybody's reaction is, why? What's wrong with Jonathan? He's got everything. He's got a beautiful wife, three great kids, a job, the house. He's got it all. He's hysterical. He's funny. He's a good guy. And you know what? Your heart breaks because it's true. You're that guy. You do have it all. And yet you had these dark, dark days. I probably didn't even know how bad it was. And then Jess would tell me some stuff. And, you know, you were really honest with me and you told me, it's really bad. And that's the problem with mental illness is like you want to make someone feel better, which is telling them it's going to be okay. And I'll tell you right now, some days it's just not frigging going to be okay right away.
I think that's a very good point. One of the things I kind of want to just reiterate to some of the listeners out there is the ability not to be able to explain your feelings is one of the symptoms that I had, and whether it was Shannon or my wife or my kids, because those are the ones who are in my inner circle, would ask me, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I would say, I don't know. I just don't feel right. I feel off. I don't know. I mean, that is a sign, not being able to
Yeah.
express how you're feeling. I mean, they were bad. I mean,
Like you say to me, nothing happened. Nothing happened today. I just don't know.
yeah, it's this idea that, there needs to always be a trigger. Now, sometimes there are triggers, but sometimes it just comes. I mean, I have free floating anxiety. I have free floating depression. One of the things that I think, going back to what Shannon said, one of the reasons I started this podcast was Shannon had mentioned earlier that I had a lot of friends and I really was kind of like the life of the party. So when I went to Sierra Tucson, they called me Bing Bong, as I said in episode 1, because they thought, like from the movie Inside Out, that I knew everybody loved me, I was funny, and I got around. And when they coined me out, which I talked about in one of my reels, one of the guys said he wishes he lived by me so he could hang out with me all the time and just have fun. And I had to tell them that I don't do that anymore. I don't have that massive friend group. I don't have that, outgoing personality. And that's something that I really wanted to change. When we talk about your why, when I said that my why has to be about me, one of the things that I need to change is I need to get back to that. And that is why I'm doing the podcast. It's very cathartic for me to be able to sit here and tell you about how my life is going, and I hope it helps others because it's helping me. But now I'm feeling better, being able to be open and share it and talk to people. And I'm getting back in that mood of being able to socialize. And I hope that by talking about this more, people will just, open up and stuff. So Shannon, before you go, I have one last question. Are there any good stories you have about me? Anything? Can you think of anything? I know it's only been 47 years, but in those, and I don't want to talk about when I had my shoulder surgery and I had nowhere to go, so I slept on your couch for 2 weeks. I don't want to talk about, I don't know. What do you got for me?
I really, anybody out there that knows Jonathan, he's extremely likable. This dude can talk up the Starbucks person, they remember him. Anyone that meets Jonathan knows he's that guy that would help him out. You're just that guy. You really are a teddy bear kind of guy. Story. No, I'm not ready for the stories yet. I'm gonna save them for down the road. But I will say that one of the best memories I have is of late, okay, and something I'm going through. And you just said, Shan, it's gonna be okay. Don't worry about it. And I had to hear it from you, Jonathan. I had to hear it from you.
Well, I'm glad I could help. And it seems like you just plugged yourself to be on another episode by holding off on the story. So I'm going to see how this episode goes. And then if it works out right and people give me the thumbs up, maybe we'll have you back. But Sean, I can't thank you enough for being on this episode. I love you.
I love
and
you,
I'll
brother.
talk to you soon. All right. Thanks a lot, Sean. And that wraps up another episode of Moderate to Severe. Remember, it is okay to not be okay. Mental health is a journey, and every step counts, no matter how small. I hope today's discussion resonated with you and reminded you that you are not alone in this journey. Please do not use this advice medically, as this is just my story and my tales. If you need help, please seek it out from a medical professional go to a hospital, or call 988, the suicide hotline. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your friends or family. Let's crack the stigma and keep the conversation going. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and join us next week. Take care of yourselves, and remember that reaching out for help is a sign of strength. Until next time, keep looking after your mental health and supporting each other. This is Jonathan Scott. Have a great day.